Welcome to today's session. This is episode 4 in our Usable Knowledge Live Literacy Insights series. I'm Phil Capin. I'm an assistant professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. For those that have been able to join our previous sessions, you'll know that we've covered the science of reading. We've talked about how to support students with dyslexia. We've also talked about multilingual students. Today, we're turning to a different set of questions that are coming up constantly for educators and families. We're going to talk about what counts as a healthy literacy experience in a world full of screens and now AI. How do we tell the difference between those opportunities that support language and literacy, and those that may distract from more powerful learning experiences? Before we dive in, I want to thank everyone for entering in the chat uh, where they where they're coming from, who they are, and offering up some questions. We'll try to address those in our conversation today. Really fortunate to be joined by our guest, Ying Xu. She is an assistant professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Her work examines how technologies, including AI, shape children's language and literacy experiences and affect children's well-being. She's designed and studied AI tools that interact directly with students during activities like storybook reading, and she's someone that cares deeply about child development. So she's thinking about how these tools affect them academically, but also emotionally and socially. Ying, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to our look forward to our conversation.
Great. So, our goal with this series and with this episode is always to share knowledge gleaned from research with practitioners and parents, those who are doing the real day-to-day work of supporting children. So before this episode, I heard from a few of those folks, and one question that kept coming up is, how should we prioritize print books versus digital books? Children have the opportunity to encounter ebooks and tablets and audiobooks, and I think, lots of uncertainty about what the best formats are for engaging with text. So I'd like to start with a pretty concrete question, and then we'll zoom out from there. So, how might a child's experience be different when they're reading on a screen versus a print book?
Yeah, this is a great question. So if you think about reading a digital book, so there are many different forms of digital books, right? So we could think of Kindle books where you could just read, but there might be the dictionary function there. If you encounter vocabulary that you don't understand, you could click on the dictionary so that you receive explanation. And you could also think about those more of the tablet-based ebooks where they're usually narration. So you don't have to really read the text and you can listen to the story. And so there are usually also interactive, we call it hotspots, where the kids could click on the screen. They could receive visual and auditory feedback like a animal moving or quacking, things like that. So it's just that ebooks are a lot more busier than print book. So for print book, if a child is holding a print book, so almost the only thing that they could do is really reading the text and understanding the story. But for ebook, it just opens up a lot of opportunities, and we could call it affordances, and sometimes it's also a form of distraction, right? So what if a child is really obsessed with clicking on the hotspot and enjoying the interactive features? And then it gets the question whether it is still considered as reading. So in my research, so I'm just very curious to look at just what kids are actually doing when they are reading ebooks. What I have found is that when there is the audio narration feature available, most of the kids would turn on the narration and listen to the book. So this is almost just a tendency. So most of kids enjoy listening to the story. And kids also found clicking the interactive features really fun, but it is questionable how much those kind of interactions really lead to comprehension and development of reading ability.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know the literature quite like you do, but my read on it, and maybe it's influenced by that study by Adriana Buss's group a few years ago, is that, the differences between digital reading and print book reading are not that large. I think they found like a really small effect, maybe favoring the print book reading for the reasons you said, but that there's lots of ways in which the digital components that are not actually related to the screen, but associated functions of the programs that could influence both positively. Like they found, I think, that story comprehension was stronger when there were supports in place. But they also found that like a parent and a child reading outperformed, or an adult and a child outperformed the digital, right? And so
Mhm.
I thought that was an interesting. Is that your read of the literature?
Yeah, so it's actually super interesting when we think about younger kids when they read with their parents. And so there are a lot of studies looking at parent-child interactions when they read ebooks versus print books together. I think the consensus is that if there is no specific features designed to promote parent-child interactions, just parents spend way more time talking about
Mm,
the device and also manage behaviors if they read ebooks as compared to print book. And print books would just encourage richer conversations around the stories. But there are also ebooks that are specifically designed to support parent-child interactions. You could think about ebooks that embed conversational prompts, like questions the parents could ask the child when they read together. So for those kind of ebooks, they actually found it's actually quite effective in supporting richer conversations between the parents and the child.
yeah. Okay. So parents are more likely to talk when engaged with a print book, it sounds like, and that conversation is really powerful. And then maybe not all screens are created equal. I think about my own child, like she's a third grader and she's working with a Kindle and she has a novel on there and there's like no notifications that are disrupting, or there's no other apps that she could, click on. And so it is usually continuous reading. Whereas if she was reading on an iPad, there might be lots of um, potentially attention-grabbing features like notifications or alternative competing apps that she could be interested in.
Yeah, so I would say that Kindle is a special kind of ebook. So there are studies also looking at people's reading of Kindle versus like print text. I think the only difference is that if they are reading text that require them to jump from sections to sections, and there is an advantage of reading on print because you could flip through pages much more easily
Mm,
than on Kindle. But if they are just reading narrative text, for example, sequentially from the beginning to the end, there is not that much of difference between print versus digital book, specifically Kindle in that case.
yeah. And these, digital books have lots of affordances, related to access, full digital libraries where people can access more text. There's
Mhm.
also, what's particularly interest of mine is that these uh, programs or platforms allow access to devices through like larger fonts and read aloud features, which can be beneficial for those students who need those supports.
Yeah, that's totally true. So for my PhD, so we did a project to look at a special types of text feature and how that would support students' reading comprehension. If you think about like text that there are long sentences, for example, it could be challenging for students to decode long sentences. And there are technologies that could actually segment those sentences into smaller chunks and also have the proper indentation. So the students are just better aware of the sentence structure in a way to facilitate their understanding of the syntax, to facilitate comprehension. So we've done a district-wide randomized controlled trial to look at having access to this kind of text um, impact on student standardized literacy outcome. So we have found a smaller positive impact on middle school students' standardized literacy outcome when they have access to this kind of specialized program.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I want to talk more about your research, but while we're sort of thinking sort of broadly about educational technology, I think another question that's coming up right now, and a lot of strong opinions about this is, the impact of educational technology on children's reading, sort of writ large or more broadly. What's your view on the literature there?
Mhm. Yeah. So the consensus is that kids read less right now as compared to decades ago. So there is no consensus exactly what drives that decline of reading time, but most of people think that technology is one reason, right? Because now we have access to other forms of entertainment and a lot of information, especially shorter text from social media platforms and online platforms. It just makes it less of a tempting activity for kids to engage in long text. So the reading time decline is definitely one change that we have noticed in the past decades. And the second thing is that just children's ability to read. So there are a lot of digital platforms that are designed specially to support different types of sub skills of reading. So, for example, comprehension, understanding of the macro structure of the text. And so the studies have found that if the platform is designed to support specific skills and specific kind of knowledge, it has been actually proven quite effective because technologies are actually available to provide more of the individualized and personalized practices for students to engage in, for example, reading, and then they complete quizzes and complete interactive activities and receive immediate feedback. So this has been actually quite effective. So I think when you think about the question of how technologies are impacting reading ability in general, I think first maybe is to be blamed to the decline of leisure reading when kids engage in reading just for fun. But it could also be a very effective tool to support like specific skills. And I think those are kind of mixed, like the positive and negative impacts.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I would add that the decline in reading is not just related to children, right? Adults are reading less
Yes.
across age groups. I think it's, the top 1% of readers, the individuals who
Mhm.
read most account for most of the reading that's occurring. And we're seeing among them, they're holding strong adults in reading, but across all other groups that we're seeing a decline in reading. So it's not just children, but also their parents and other adults. And so, yeah, I think it's a good idea to draw this distinction between the effects of technology broadly on literacy and educational technology. I think of the meta-analysis by Silverman, which found that there's a lot of variability within so they looked at the effects of educational interventions on literacy outcomes for elementary children, as you know, but maybe
Mhm.
not all of our guests know. And they found a positive overall effect, but there was a lot of variability. And I think, what we see is that in these studies where they're really designed and well monitored, many of them, that we see these educational interventions are technology interventions are leading to improved outcomes. However, when you visit schools, and I visit schools, you visit schools, that's not always the case, right? We don't see that the best tools are being selected and that there's these systems and structures in place. And I think that might be one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of pushback around educational technology right now. Is I guess my question for you is your sense that there's maybe issues with some of the platforms, but there's also lots of issues around these technologies and their implementation in schools that might be causing some of the concerns.
Yeah, so I think that so for kind of well-controlled interventions and studies, I think it might have overestimated the benefits
Mhm.
of educational technologies because, like you said, the teachers might be incentivized to use those technologies. And there is usually a lot of support coming from, for example, the research team to facilitate teachers' implementation of those technologies. And there are usually also professional development opportunities that come with it. And I think another interesting finding when we look across different digital technology intervention on literacy is that usually the technology is not the only component in the intervention. And
Mm.
sometimes they coupled with in-person, so for example, reading clubs and in-person tutoring to kind of really amplify the benefits of educational technology. So it's very difficult to actually disentangle and single out and say that the positive impacts we're seeing is just coming from the technology platform.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It's always more complicated than what meets the eye. So I want to turn our attention to AI, artificial intelligence, and young children. This is a topic that you've studied extensively. Maybe you could tell us just a little bit about your research and what it tells us about AI and particularly conversational agents and how they might support early language and literacy.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are many different ways AI might support literacy. And let me just give you one example. If you think about the kinds of AI technologies like Siri, Alexa, and ChatGPT, it's a form of conversational AI where you could have like a conversation and a dialogue with it. So the interesting thing is that now you could actually program this kind of AI to ask children, for example, comprehension questions. And children could verbally respond to those questions and open-ended questions and receive immediate and tailored feedback from the AI agent. And we know from the literature, so just having conversations with kids and also asking them questions and providing feedback, it's a very effective way to enhance their comprehension. And AI, to some extent, might be able to simulate this kind of dialogic interaction during reading. So in my work, so I've been looking at the effects of reading and having this kind of question asking interaction with an AI agent on students' comprehension of stories. And what we found was that first, it is true that having conversations and answering questions with an AI agent could enhance children's comprehension as compared to the just listening to the stories alone. And we have also found that if the AI is designed well, so the degree to which they could improve comprehension is actually quite similar with a human tutor that asks a similar set of questions. And so this is actually something that is quite promising. We have seen and we saw that there are probably other programs have implemented this kind of technologies to support dialogic reading.
Yeah. And I think it returns to the theme of access. I mean, one of the big challenges in tutoring is finding enough adults who can provide high quality tutoring instruction. That's one of the big challenges around high dosage tutoring in our country. And it sounds like that the dialogic partner, could be helpful in addressing this and providing access to more students, not to replace the tutor provided instruction or the parent if it's a home context, but to supplement. Are
Mhm.
there, yeah,
Yeah, so I totally agree. I think the idea of using AI to support dialogic reading is definitely not a replacement of students' interactions with teachers and parents. But there are moments when the students do not have an adult to engage with. So maybe AI could be a good supplement in those moments. And when it comes to the high impact tutoring program, another promising way to use AI is actually to use AI to support the tutors to engage in interactions with the student. So the AI in this case is not directly talking and interacting with the students, but suggests like different moves that the tutors could do to, for example, correct students' misunderstanding or kind of provide explanations to the student. And so there are studies that have found that this kind of tutor-facing AI is quite supportive and effective, especially in helping less experienced tutors.
yeah. So potential benefits for students and educators if well designed.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Are there other projects that you're working on related to supporting young children that you think are really important for people to know about?
Mhm. Yeah, I just wanted to also mention the project we are working on to use AI to support parent-child reading. And so it has been actually a huge challenge to support and provide trainings for parents to engage in effective reading routines with kids. And it's just expensive for parents to attend in-person workshops or provide trained specialists to provide this kind of individual support. So AI could be a way to model the kinds of effective evidence-based interactive strategies. So we have a project that we build AI platforms to where the conversational agent suggests questions that the parents could ask the kids and also just model the way how you want to engage with a child. But we also use a gradual release of responsibility model at the beginning of the intervention. So the AI played a more effective and active role in modeling. But then in the next phase, the parents step up to kind of take the lead of engaging with children. I think this could be also a very interesting model to change our mindset from AI has to be a replacement of interpersonal interaction to thinking what could we do to use AI to support this kind of very rich teacher-child and parent-child interactions.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, and I think that oftentimes the conversations about AI get oversimplified, and there's lots of ways it could potentially support educators, as you pointed out, and parents. I want to shift to older students. And so we know that older students, adolescents, even students in the upper elementary grades and beyond, are engaging with AI chatbots like ChatGPT, maybe the best known, and they're using them. These tools during reading and writing assignments. And so, from your research and maybe the broader literature, what are the ways in which students are using these tools right now? And what do you think of as the opportunities or risks associated with the ways that these chatbots are being used?
Yeah, so this might be a not only for students but adults as well. Our graduate
Mm.
students are using AI this way as well. Yeah, so we actually just finished a survey with 7,000 high school students. We asked them how you use AI, in what ways you use AI in your writing process. We actually found that so there are actually a variety of different ways how students engage with AI in writing. So, for example, brainstorming ideas and asking AI to provide evidence to support their argument, and grammatical errors and just fixing language, and also tailoring the essay and writing to specific audience and requirements. So there are just a variety of different ways, and actually the students actually engage in all of those activities quite frequently in our report. So this is definitely real. Students are using AI in their reading and writing. And for reading, I think one of the most common ways students use is to create summary instead of reading the entire text, especially when they don't have a lot of time. So usually they turn to AI. So just to generate a quick summary for me, I'm going to just read the summary instead of the text. And so what is the kind of the impact on actually reading comprehension? So I think there is a very interesting study that looks at if the students only have, for example, 5 minutes, so they have to choose either to read an AI generated summary versus a 40-page text. In this case, actually students might have a better understanding of the text if they read the AI summary, because it does provide a more comprehensive kind of big picture view of what the article is about than they just skimming through probably just the first 10 pages of the reading. But if the students have more time, and so the advantage of actually reading and engaging in the actual text comes up because there are just much more nuances kind of embedded within the
Mm.
text that you just cannot get from just reading the AI summary. And there is another thing that, so there are a lot of different angles and perspective we could use to interpret the text, right? So students bring in their own perspective and own backgrounds. And we, even though we read the same text, we might actually walk out with different understanding. So that is something that AI summary cannot provide, because all you get is filtered through AI's perspective. So it's not your own interpretation. So I do worry students' overuse of AI generated summary to engage in reading assignments.
Yeah. No, I think and to your earlier point, it's not just kids, this is adults as well, and graduate students, maybe faculty. I think under the right conditions, chatbots can support learning. But I think, like you, I'm really concerned about the use and the pernicious effects it could have when not used purposefully. And I think that there's competing demands for our time. And
Mhm.
even if, students know that, the right ways, and I think AI literacy is sort of pushing us in this way to help students understand the ways in which to use it. I think my own, perspective is that the behavioral changes aren't going to follow the knowledge exactly. There's many adults who know that exercise is really important and avoiding highly processed foods is ideal. And yet, we skip our workouts and we eat fast food sometimes, particularly when there's demands on our time, right? And so I'm not sure we should expect anything different of young people. And so I guess I'm wondering, what do you think are the mix of AI literacy or guardrails that could help to ensure that these chatbots are used effectively and promote learning?
Yeah, I think you just got to a very interesting point, which is what kind of AI literacy we need for students. So there is one form of AI literacy, which is more on the knowledge side, right? So we educate students, AI might have risks. So if you overuse AI, you're outsourcing your thinking. So this is not healthy for your learning and development. A lot of the students know it. So in our survey, again, with the high school students, actually almost 50% of them said that they felt that they might have used AI too much
Mm,
in their study. So they wanted to actually limit their AI usage, but it's just very difficult to do. So it's kind of similar with the kinds of studies that we have found on social media and internet. So then it gets to then what else could we do to support students more responsible use of AI in addition to just telling them AI could be wrong and AI could be unhealthy. I think one thing that we really need to think about is how to kind of increase students' inclination to exercise their own thinking and to utilize their critical thinking in the process. So I think the fundamental thing is really could we find something kids genuinely are interested in doing? So if they are just super motivated and very interested, for example, in Harry Potter. So my son is reading Harry Potter now, probably for the third time because he's so into this book. It's just so interesting to him. I don't think using AI summary would be a good strategy for him. So he didn't use AI at all. But there are other texts that he is less interested in, then maybe AI would be an option for him. I think the key is really what interests kids and how we could make the education and the learning process fun and motivating and especially more relatable to kids' everyday life.
yeah. Well, I think that would be ideal. I do wonder though if there's going to have to be some systems and structures in place to help people as they're still developing these self-regulatory behaviors, and may have some maladaptive behaviors. Because you can imagine, that for students that don't have those motivational patterns that you're describing, or there's some disconnect between what they're asked to do in school and what their interests are, that it could be challenging.
Yeah, I think this is definitely we have to do it like through multiple ways. Yeah, so
Yeah.
one increasing motivation and interest, and the other kind of aspect is really how to strengthen the system design so that it provide more guardrails and scaffolding for students who are still learning what is the best way to navigate with AI. I do want to say though, so if students were given options so they might actually choose the kind of AI platform with less guardrails and less kind
Hmm.
of restriction. So I think the idea of providing well scaffolded AI and wall garden type of AI might be more feasible in a school environment, but the burden might fall onto parents. For example, if we wanted to continue to monitor children's AI usage and selection of different platforms.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So we're going to wrap up here in a second. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about AI. I think AI is definitely important topic right now. It just feels everywhere. But I also wanted to just ask people to zoom out. So there are so many different factors that are impacting children's literacy, reading and writing development. So it really exists within an ecosystem. So there is no magic bullet of one AI platform could solve all the problems. So it's really kind of how all of these different factors are playing together to shape children's development. Yeah, so I think it's great that we're focusing on AI, but also so there are also many other very important factors that we could pay attention to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have other sessions in this series that will focus on those. So that's a nice segue. Ying, I want to thank you for your contributions, both to our understanding of how technology affects children's literacy and language development and their well-being, and for sharing that knowledge today. So thank you, Ying.
Thank you so much.
And to the audience, thank you as well for joining us. For those that are attending live, you'll receive an email with links to the video recording and additional resources. Well, I saw in the chat there was a lot of interest in some of the things that you were working on, Ying, so we'll make sure to share those. And we hope that you'll join us for our next installment in this series. We'll be joined by Harvard faculty member Meredith Rowe, an expert on early language, which is foundational to all literacy. And she's going to provide some practical insights for families about how to support language and literacy in the home context. So thanks again for being here and for all that the practitioners do to improve outcomes for children. Thank you.